apprenticeships have taken on a new lease of life. There are proposals for extending apprenticeships to level 3, another route into that value that a person can bring with entrepreneurship and employable skills into the workplace. One of the things that the other thing that I think needs to be addressed here, and perhaps part of the issues that are arising with employers saying that graduates don't have the skills that are needed for the workplace. And part of that, I think, is a generational technological gap. Our students today, and perhaps yourselves in this room, are used to social networking, used to Twitter, perhaps even used to LinkedIn. It's a continual communication wherever they are. I've been into organisations and had discussions about their technological infrastructure and how they use technology, and some of them seem to be quite terrified about even letting people have access to the internet in the office, fearful of their organisational security. And yet we have graduates who have grown up in this culture of online communication and social networking, going into the workplace and then finding the culture is radically different from how they've been used to behaving in their studies and with their friends. So there are a few things here that I think there are some agendas that we might think about in terms of our collaboration and how we establish more of a common culture that will provide the right environment for the talent stream to move smoothly into the workplace. Because there isn't any organisation that doesn't need new blood and new ideas coming through. What about the workforce? I think we've all been aware of the speeches over many years from politicians suddenly realising that the highest percentage of those who should be studying are already in the workplace. They're not 18-year-olds coming through, or 16-year-olds coming through into further education. So there's a big agenda here for upskilling, for retraining, for flexibility and lifelong learning going forward into the future. Many education institutions are already contributing tremendously to this agenda, whether it's through short courses, online learning, or, as is becoming increasingly the case, accrediting programs that already exist in the workplace and giving them more of a formal standing and qualification. I think there's probably an issue though, isn't there? A number of employers are very sceptical about giving qualifications and credit at the end of workplace learning. Fearful perhaps, as perhaps we are in our own organisations, that if somebody has those credentials, it's a personal passport to a better job, to moving on elsewhere. So I think this goes hand in glove. We're talking through opportunities within the workplace for using those skills and that accreditation to contribute more to the organisation that people are already in. In some ways, we become quite fragmented in educational organisations, and we worry about, well, is this workplace learning at higher education level? Or is this at further education level? Can we count it in our hiss and return? We've got to get better at our collaboration between ourselves so that we can offer other organisations more of a seamless route for workplace learning. Now, what about relationships? Many of our alumni wear lots of other hats. They could be the MD of the organisation. They could be the team leader. They could be the person with 1 year's experience in that organisation. We all know that in the States, alumni relationships with their alma mater are much more developed than they are in this country, and I think we're catching up fast. But we need to make sure that we recognise that those people we're collaborating with have many dimensions and many roles. They may be our own alumni. They may be leading in an organisation we're working with. They may also sit on an influential body that we regard as one of our stakeholders. So we need to make sure those dynamics in collaboration work very well as well. I know at Hertfordshire we've had quite a lot of discussion about what we call the ladder of relationships as well, and really trying to bear in mind the depth, if you like, and development of those relationships, starting perhaps from being just a customer-supplier relationship through to what the business might call a key account, to really establishing real partnerships, real collaborations, possibly even joint ventures, and then jointly working in some sort of umbrella alliance, which is where perhaps these technology and innovation centres may also come in the future. Relationships are difficult. They take a lot of hard work. And one of the barriers, we're as guilty as anybody else, is about protecting our business. We label things commercial in confidence. We don't want to share with other people. I don't know if any of you have seen that Julia Roberts film called Duplicity. Not her best by any means. But if you have seen it, you'll know it's a real woven web of industrial espionage between various different organisations, and at the end, well, maybe I shouldn't tell at the end, the key players get double-crossed as well. But it's an extreme portrait, but actually we have to realise that there's a balance to be struck between protecting business interests and sharing ideas. And it's moving that dividing line perhaps nearer the sharing agenda that will bear fruit. And then perhaps the big prize, enterprise and innovation, which is actually at the end of the day, of course, about making money, isn't it? It's about business success. It's about survival. We all talk about spin-in, spin-out companies, but actually it's about commercialisation. It's about taking those jewels in our crown, that new knowledge, those ideas, and taking them that bit further and making them work to achieve economic growth, a better society, and so on. And there are various initiatives around open innovation and shared services, but it's also about working in a global marketplace. And I think one of the issues that happens a lot with the BCE agenda is that we tend to focus back down on local communities. Now, they're very important, but actually this is an international agenda as well. And our alliances and our collaborations may not just be with those we see locally or they're easy to visit. They may be people on the other side of the world. And with emerging economies in China and India and so on, we need to really bear that in mind. I'm going to move on now to shaping society. I've spent rather a long time on economic growth, and I can assure you I'm not going to talk about each of these bubbles in the same depth as I have with economic growth. But I think what I would really like to say is that economic growth is just one part of this bigger agenda of shaping our society. There are lots of quotations around about the value of science, and I think we should really take that word science in its widest possible connotation. It is about what do we want our society to be like? How can we use those great strengths that we have, not just for economic growth, but for our health and welfare, for our future leaders, for our environment. Now, the Jisc is doing a lot of work on carbon reduction, the greening of ICT, and so on. Can we combine that with the BCE agenda? Are there things that we can actually take forward as a good practice in education, given the targets we've got for carbon reduction, and transfer that good practice into other organisations so that overall the cumulative effect of that is much better for our society? And you can see the other examples that have been picked out here by government departments. There's a lot of work going on in education that contributes to health and welfare, and not just in medicine and the other aspects of the health professions. But I'm really mindful of some of the work going on in robotics, where the purpose of the robots is to support people in old age. Or in a case I know of from Hertfordshire, where our Caspar robot is working with children with autism to actually help them to live a more communicative and socially aware life. So there's an enormous number of things that we can bring to bear to this wider agenda. And I think we'd be the first to recognise that perhaps in terms of the Jisc BCE programme, the community engagement and this public value has not been quite as developed in the previous years as it needed to be. And so a new key priority is emerging here about public value and civic engagement. I think the last point I'd like to make before I leave this slide is about our future leaders. Now, many of you in this room will be an awful lot younger than I am, but I have a vested interest in what the next generations are doing to make sure the society I live in, and when I retire the society I live in, is where I want to be. That's a personal agenda. But actually, there's a broader agenda here. We have a responsibility in education to make sure that we are educating those future leaders to develop the economies and the society that actually will be of benefit to them and to all of us. Just a little quote at the bottom there. I thought it was really interesting that there's a new magazine called Future Leaders, and it is highlighting high-flying graduates and others who are coming into play in taking things forward. So what about our own businesses? Well, put a lot of things on here. I think we're all aware of the financial constraints and the impending comprehensive spending review, which is due to be published at the end of October, and we may find out more then. I'd like to just pick out a couple of things from here. On the left-hand end here, playing to our strengths, there's an agenda for some time now, particularly in higher education, about differentiation across the sector. BCE can pick up on this. This is about playing to our strengths. What do we do well in our own organisations that we can actually develop in this BCE agenda? We don't have to do everything, but let's make sure that what we do is productive and effective. Coming down the track, we've got the changes for research excellence with the Research Excellence Framework. I'm not sure if anyone in the room is involved in any of the impact pilots for the REF, but quite interesting to look at the words that are being used at the moment anyway for the pilots in exploring how research impact might be assessed. And they talk about the economy, about society, about public policy, about the environment, about international development and the quality of life. Now, the rules are not yet fixed around impact assessment for the REF, but that agenda is those common words again, running right through. The green box, business-like efficiency. One of the things that was really interesting in some of the workshops we've held for BCE over the last 2 or 3 years is the examples that are emerging about how the groups of people addressing the BCE agenda and the collaboration from their institutions are actually having a knock-on effect inside their institutions in terms of change working practices, in terms of efficiency, in terms of a better experience for everybody and not just the people that they initially started out to work with. From simple examples like just how do you use space, room allocation, fitting in short courses and so on, which actually had a spin-off in one organisation to be a much better experience for all students.